This is Big Podcast.
Here we go. David Hooper here, Build a Big Podcast. I'm in the process of rebuilding my studio. This is a room within a room now. That's what I call it. I built a bunch of panels. And the other thing that I did once I installed the panels was I completely switched up the system that I'm recording on. I used to go through mixers and had compressors and limiters and all this stuff. And I pretty much stripped it down. And I will go into exactly what that is soon. This episode is being recorded on a Mac. That's one thing that's different. For years, I've used a laptop that Dell gave me. They wanted me to promote it. So they sent it to me. Think I'm some kind of influencer or something. That laptop actually made it to the promotion of my last audiobook called Big Podcast. And if you haven't seen that video, it's worth checking out. BigPodcast.com is the website. That is where I talk about marketing your podcast, getting more people to your podcast, having a message on your podcast that people care about and people will share, and also how to make money with that podcast. Every week, I send out a newsletter. That is also there. BigPodcast.com/newsletter. This is the audio version of that newsletter. That's why I'm calling this episode Big Podcast Insider. That's the name of the newsletter. I'm going to go over the newsletter elements and give you a little bit more information about the things that I covered. If you want that newsletter, again, bigpodcast.com/newsletter. The instant audience, that's what I covered in this issue. People don't believe this. Well, maybe they do. Maybe they believe it too much. I see a lot of people, they start a podcast and they think, well, man, we've got 8 billion people in the world. And if I get 0.0000001% of those people, I'll have a hit podcast. That's not how it works. You got to be a little bit more skillful with your podcast marketing. You can't just throw something out to people, regardless of what it is that you are into, what it is that you talk about. There is an audience waiting to hear from you. That's where the 8 billion people comes in. There are a ton of folks in the world. Somebody likes what you're doing. They just have to know about it. That's the concept of this issue. There's an existing audience that's dying to hear from you. And let me explain how that works. There's that podcast that you listen to. Maybe it's this one. And you can't wait for a new episode to come out. You know when those new episodes come out, you're ready for each of them. You put them at the top of the queue. You're ready to listen to them, and you are present when listening to them. It's not the stuff that you listen to in the background or you think, I'll get to that someday. What I want to help you do in the work that I do at bigpodcast.com and also in this episode and in this newsletter issue, I want to help you make a podcast that people feel the same way about. There are 2 elements of that. One of them, having the content that people will listen to. The second is reaching out to those people and letting them know that you exist. I'll tell you an interesting story. Probably a couple months ago, I sold a car. And I was exhausted during the process. I wanted to do a direct person-to-person sale. And it's especially weird right now because we've got coronavirus and you've got to have people come over and they've got to test your car and you don't know if they're sick. They don't know if you're sick. And people haggle with you and they stand you up. Oh, I'm not interested. And they go somewhere else. So I ended up selling the car to a wholesaler. Easy and done. And they send the guy who's going to transport the car to my house. He's loading it up on the trailer. He said, man, this is a good car. He says, I buy and sell cars on the side. I would have loved to have purchased this. I said, really? How much would you have given me for it? And it's more than I got. Let's just put it that way. I didn't know about the dude, though. It's the exact same experience. That's where marketing comes in. This wholesaler that I went to, they had the marketing. They were able to reach me. This dude, who would have used that marketing money to pay me more money, I had no idea he existed. That's the situation that we're in. It sounds like this is really easy. Just create the content that people want. Just have the product that people want. Just have the price that people want. But it's not. You've got to do marketing. That's the first part of the equation. Then what you've got to do, you've got to have great content that people want. A lot of people, they throw out random episodes in the feed. They hope that something sticks. It almost never does. You've got to have great stuff that people want. You've got to talk to them. You've got to listen to them. And that's what I want you to think about when I tell you this first place that I want you to go to find that existing audience. It is also a place for you to listen to them, to find out what they want. So when you go to them, they say, oh man, I can't believe you existed. This is exactly what I'm looking for. How did I not know about you? They'll tell their friends. They'll tell their friends. That's how you grow everything. So this first link, it will be listed in the episode notes, podcast.bigpodcast.com. It is called the Hive Index. You go to the Hive Index, you search for something. Let's say it's podcasting. Let's say it's selling cars. Let's say it's buying and selling cars. However you want to phrase it, it will let you know where you can go to connect with people who are talking about those things. It's perfect for a podcaster who's looking for content ideas, looking for guests, looking to get the word out about your podcast. Second thing, this sounds so simple, but I've broken this down into a very easy process for you to follow. It's actually not me. It's the guy that I'm linking to. He put together 10 tweets, a tweet thread. Each one of these, 240 characters. So it's super easy. He shows you exactly how to use Google. Google is pretty boring for most people. You go there. This is what do you want to search? Podcasting. Then the results come up. Sometimes you get the results that are completely different from what you want. And let me give you an example. Let's say you're looking for speakers for your event, for your podcast. What does that mean? Is it speakers for the PA system, or is it speakers, as in public speakers, people who will present something at your event or on your podcast? This guy's broken it down so you can narrow between those two things. Seriously, it's worth a read. It'll take you about 5 minutes, maybe even 3, and you will be a Google ninja. And it's things like this. Here's one that you probably know about. If you put something in quotes, such as big podcast in quotes, that's how it's going to come up in Google. Big space podcast. You'll see that within a sentence, I want a big podcast, or you'll see something like this podcast, build a big podcast. You know that, but there are about 10 of these things that you can do. I'm talking about letting Google come up with synonyms, leaving certain things out, such as, I don't want live event speakers. I want speakers for my PA system. It lets you know how to do this. It's a super easy read. 3 to 5 minutes is all it's going to take you. Podcast.bigpodcast.com. Go there for the link. One of the things you're doing by going through this process, this research process, is what I call personalization. You are making it feel that your podcast was made just for a certain person. Now, very specifically, that's one way of doing personalization. One way we see is in emails, such as, Dear David, hello, how are you today? And if you've got a mailing list, you're doing a merge to different people. Dear Richard, Dear Joseph, Dear William, Dear Bill. And I use that example because William and Bill, two different things. If you go by the name Bill, I can't just assume that you don't go by William if it's on your credit card. I'll give you an example for that. Got a friend of mine, he worked at Microsoft. He was doing an event where Bill Gates had to sign his name. It was going to recognize the name, and then it was going to let him in based on his signature, something like that. It was some kind of AI kind of tool. Bill Gates is giving this presentation, and he thinks he's going to sign it Bill Gates. We're going to let him into the software. Nope. Bill Gates signs his name William Gates. That threw the whole presentation off. Why they didn't check it, I don't know, but that's what I'm talking about when I talk about personalization. People love personalization. You know, Destiny's Child, say my name, say my name. When you don't do that, they think you're acting kind of shady. And Gen Z is especially prone to that. They like personalization. They're more likely to buy goods and services when a brand has created a personal experience. It's your name. It's this content that we're talking about. That's why I want to talk to you about Google and finding that hive, finding where the people are, listening to them, talking to them, having these phone calls, these chats, however you want to do it. That is going to go a long way. I work in podcasting day in and day out. I've done radio since 1991. 30 years ago, I started in radio when I was a freshman in college. I've been doing podcasting since 2005. Still, when I'm about to do a book or do a big project, like a live event, I get on the phone with people and I talk with them one-on-one. I'm part of a local meetup that we have in Nashville every month. And the reason that I'm part of that is because I want to sit down during the event, after the event, before the event, I want to see the questions that people are asking, and I want to talk to people one-on-one. That will go a long way when it comes to you understanding your audience. So that personalized content plus knowing how to refer to people, that's how you're in. Podcasters, for example, we've got rituals that we do. We use a certain lexicon. We've got pre-interviews. You know what I'm talking about when I talk about that. If I talk about a compressor, a limiter, dynamic mics, condenser mics, you know what those things mean. When I use those words, you know that I'm an insider and you're more likely to listen to me because of that. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about personalization. It's not just insider language. There's a lot to it. Podcast.bigpodcast.com if you want links to all this. Related to this, in this issue, I link to a free sound effects resource and also a paid sound effects resource that will help you to get listeners in the mood and be more receptive for what it is that you have to say. This is an example you've probably heard me use if you listen to this podcast, but I want you to think about being in the Bahamas, being in Jamaica. You're in a hotel. You're going down from your room to the lobby. You walk out of that elevator. What kind of music is playing in the lobby? Jamaica, Bahamas. You know the type of music that you want to hear, and they give you that type of music. Music sets the mood, and it makes you more receptive. It gives you a better experience. You should be doing the same thing with sound effects, with music, with any kind of audio imaging that you've got within your podcast. This can be done in a few ways. Maybe it's a loop that you play under your advertising. I see a lot of people do that. And the reason they do that is, one, it lets the listener know that there's an advertisement so they can skip if they want to skip it. But also, it lets the listener know there's an advertisement so they can pay attention in a different way. And if you've done this research that I'm talking about, communicating with your audience, and you've got great content that's made just for that audience, they're going to listen up and they're going to be more receptive to what you're selling on your podcast advertising because they know that they can trust you. They know that they like you. They know that they agree with you. And they know that you're not going to lead them astray when you endorse something. If you've got that music behind you, they're going to listen up and think in a different way. Hey, man, I should listen up. David's talking about something. This will probably help my podcast. Anyway, sound effects, audio imaging, songs, music, whatever you want to call it, there are different variations of it. It's really important for you. You notice this at the very beginning of this episode. I've got these tags, different music, and then I got my voiceover guy, big podcast. So you know it's me. The reason I do that is because people listen to podcasts in cars, in gyms, when they're doing other things. You've got a cue, and you're going from one podcast to the next podcast to the next podcast. Maybe you recognize my voice. Hopefully you listen a lot, you recognize my voice. But if you don't, I'm going to let you know where you are. I'm going to let you know that we're talking about podcasting when the guy says big podcast. If you're a podcaster, you're paying more attention because of that, and we can have that better connection. So think about that. Again, one of these resources, completely free. It's great for YouTube videos, podcasts, social media. There's a hit or miss element because there's a lot of stuff on there. It can't all be good, right? There's that much stuff on there. It's not going to all be great. You don't need everything to be great. You just need that one sound effect, that one loop. You need that perfect thing for your project. It's there. And I've got another one. This one's called SoundSnap. It's got over 450,000 sound effects on it. They're categorized. You can find exactly what you want. So check it out. All the links, podcast.bigpodcast.com. While you were there, I want you to make sure that you're on the newsletter. You're getting the information that I've got at bigpodcast.com. I've got some episode templates that I'd love to send you to help you market your podcast, create episodes that people care about. Just connect the dots, fill in the blanks. It's that easy. I've got the templates already laid out for you. You put your information into it. These are proven templates. They've worked for others. They will work for you. I've got 25 of them. They are free. They are at bigpodcast.com. Thank you for listening to Build a Big Podcast. I'm here a lot, and I hope you'll subscribe if you're interested in doing that. Bigpodcast.com/subscribe. One click is all it takes. If you're on an iPhone, Android, you want an RSS feed, I've got it for you. One click options at bigpodcast.com/subscribe. That way you will never miss an episode. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next one.